Welcome back to the Healthy Orange Movie Reviews. I'm Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and now, with weeks and weeks of Oscar blitz and Oscar reflections, predictions, and what have you behind us, I can now return to my series on my favorite films of the first decade of the new millennium. And today, I am going to be talking about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. So, to begin, there's a lot of Star Trek backstory that you may wish to know before I delve into this film, but I will keep it brief and as non-nerdy as possible. Star Trek was originally a TV series back in the 60s, focusing on Kirk, who's a human, and Spock, who's an alien with pointy ears and is very logical and rigid, and it's about them going on a voyage on their ship, the Starship Enterprise, through the cosmos, seeking new worlds, new life, new civilizations, as they say. And so you could call them the sci-fi descendants of Carl Sagan if you want. Why not? Although they probably predated Carl Sagan, but whatever. So the Star Trek continued on as a series of other TV shows, the best of which in my opinion is Deep Space Nine. Yes. And then a lot of other movies too, some that focused on Kirk and Spock, some that focused on other characters. But J.J. Abrams' film, which came out in 2009, is different from any other installment in the Star Trek canon. To begin, it looks back in a very unique way by focusing on Kirk and Spock, but going back and showing them as younger characters. In the original series, they were played by William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. In this new iteration, they're played as young men by Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. Chris Pine is Kirk, Zachary Quinto is Spock. And so the film is about looking back and showing who they were as younger men. But Star Trek, and it is just called Star Trek. Mr. Abrams opted for the simplest possible version of the title. It's not a prequel in the way that Star Wars Episode 1 was. In fact, the Mr. Abrams' Star Trek essentially exists in a universe of its own making that has a different feel than the other works that are part of the Star Trek universe, which is why I prefer to think of this film as not even necessarily a Star Trek film, but the work of an incredibly talented, up-and-coming young filmmaker who has a very unique and beautiful style. And it's a style that we get right from the beginning in the movie's opening scene, in which a captain encounters an enemy spaceship and is forced to sacrifice his life to save his wife and his child, who's being born in the midst of all the action. And the child, by the way, is going to grow up to be Kirk. And this scene, it's only a small fraction of the film, and yet it is one of the greatest moments ever to be put on screen. In this one instance, we're thrown into the heartbreak of a man who's giving up his life and of a woman who's giving birth, yet at the same time about to lose her husband and the father of her child. And it's beyond belief. And Mr. Abrams hurls us through all this mad emotion with amazing technique. We get bright colors crowding the screen, quick editing to heighten the urgency, and then, by the way, the editing's by Marianne Brandon and Mary Jo Markey. And then just amazing use of sound, like the way that the shuttle carrying Kirk's mother soars out into space, and as it soars out and she screams, suddenly everything goes quiet and Michael Giacchino's music is allowed to rise up and blot out the noise of explosions and lasers, and so we have this element of tragic poetry. And you may as well know I cry every time I watch this scene. Every time I hear Kirk's mother saying, "George, you should be here," and it's so wonderful. And it is by far the finest moment in the film, which puts Star Trek as a movie in kind of an awkward place. What do you do when your opening scene is the best scene in the entire movie? It kind of poses a problem, because everything else is immediately going to fall short by comparison. And in fact, it's so insane that the actors in this opening scene, like the ones that die, whose characters die, Ferran Tahir as a captain who dies, Chris Hemsworth in one of his breakout roles as the other captain, Kirk's father, and then what's her name? Oh, Jennifer Morrison as Kirk's mother. Their performances are probably the finest in the film too. So sets the bar unreasonably high for the actors, seeing that kind of emotion and grief. And yet, even though that moment, that sacrifice, is untoppable, somehow the rest of the film, even if it's a come down, it's still as magnificent as anything you could hope for from a big, colorful, flashy summer blockbuster. So eventually the story loops back around to the adult Kirk, who, as I mentioned before, is played by Chris Pine, and we get this fantastic scene where he's in a bar picking a fight with these other guys, these Starfleet cadets. Starfleet, by the way, is the organization the exploratory organization Kirk himself will go on to join. And in the midst of this fight, it takes a surprisingly violent turn, and Kirk even ends up with his face covered in blood. And it's the violence of the fight that hints to you the depths of Kirk's grief about having grown up without a father. And so that's one of many instances in which you can see that there's an emotional undercurrent humming beneath Star Trek that's stronger than you normally get in a film of this scale and this genre, frankly. And so that's the gift of Star Trek. The original television series, it was about Kirk and Spock going on adventures about their voyages, where the new film is about their emotions. And for example, it's about Spock's dilemma about his kind of the clash of emotion and reason within his mind. And so when he comes up against Kirk, he after they've both joined Starfleet and are both going off into the galaxy, into the void, they're in a unique position because Spock is determined to follow the rules. He's determined to take only actions that are rational and that are right. But Kirk is a rule breaker, a mad strategist, a genius whose technique is driven by impulsiveness and a violent temper in many cases. And so Spock is taken aback by Kirk and tries to control him. Yet at the same time, that rage is boiling in Spock as well, which comes out in a scene where Kirk taunts him, and Spock just explodes with fury, punching Kirk repeatedly over and over again, and you feel the depth of his emotion bursting out of this carefully controlled person. And But the way the thing that makes Star Trek unique is the way it is it weaves these emotions in with a non-stop spectacle. Now, the interesting thing is that Mr. Abrams, as a director, he's very much a devotee of the original Star Wars trilogy, and why wouldn't he be? It's fabulous. And he's talked about its influence on his work on Star Trek. Particularly, and this is included in the special features on the DVD if you're interested, particularly how he was influenced by the fast pace of Star Wars, the quickness, the way things happen so rapidly. But here's the thing. The original Star Wars movies, they actually have they usually start out very slow. They allow the characters and the situations to develop at a kind of a relaxed pace before they burst into action later on. As opposed to Mr. Abrams, who starts Star Trek with the birth of Kirk and the sacrifice of Kirk's father. He starts it with an incredible bang. So there's this intense, heightened emotion throughout the film. And it is just insane. So, for example, the story seems to reach a fever pitch when Kirk has to disable this world-destroying device and has to leap through space and land on this platform and then fight a group of evil trenchcoat-wearing aliens and screams as he charges at them and dangles off the edge of this platform. And it's just, the pace is so aggressive and mad. And I gotta say, I like it. I like that intensity, that way that everything is so heightened and so larger than life. And the reason it works is because Mr. Abrams understands that through that quickness, through the ferocity of the action, you can heighten the emotion as well, and thus you care about the characters in the midst of the fighting. You know that Kirk is powered by grief, you know that Spock is powered by an internal dilemma about the kind of man he wants to be, and so you're immersed in it. You care. You believe in them. And so you get a series of just amazingly charged moments, like the final scene where Kirk has become the captain of the Enterprise, and Spock tells him he wants to be his first officer, and Kirk, is in this fantastic moment, Kirk stands up from his chair and walks over to Spock, and just the intensity of the movie, the way it's put together, the sight of him just standing up, is magnificent. It's really just breathtaking. And it doesn't hurt that Mr. Abrams, who has a wonderfully intelligent creative team that includes cinematographer Dan Mindell and production designer Scott Chambliss, together they seem to understand. They have a great visual style. There are all these bright colors. The spaceships have these amazing gleaming white interiors that are just beautiful. The costumes are bright colors. You get a very comic book look, but a graceful one. There's beauty in the sort of the graininess of the images, and just the colors and the bright yellows and blues and all of those different hues mixing together with these white spaceship interiors. But lest you think that Star Trek is a bland exercise in style, it is not. And I think what I love about the movie is how genuinely touching it is, and that scream, the scream of Kirk's mother at the beginning. I feel that just as it echoes out into space, it echoes throughout the whole film, allowing us to see this as a narrative of young men who are haunted by tragedy and are trying to find a way out of it by doing their jobs, by becoming explorers and fighters and heroes, and the result is really powerful and incredibly entertaining, and finally, above all, just absolutely beautiful. Well, that wraps up my dossier on J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. If you will return in 1 week, I will continue this series with a talk about Bryan Singer's Superman Returns. Wait, Superman Returns? Yes, you heard that right. You should come back and hear why I think it is an incredibly wondrous and underrated film. Thank you very much, and see you next time.